All right. So that's going done. All right. Give it a second here.
Tell me when we're officially going. And
Well, we're streaming now. Just so you know.
We're good.
We're just giving people a second to come on.
Sure. Okay, great.
Hey, thanks for joining us. We're just giving you giving people a couple seconds to get on. We're just so you know, we're actually also streaming on LinkedIn and Facebook as well. And Nelly, if you want to send me the slides, I'll pin it to the top. But but I can do that. Just email me the slides, and I'll do that.
Yeah, I think. Hang on, we'll do that. I think Aaron can hear me. Aaron will do that since I'm screen sharing.
Okay, not a problem. So, just want to thank everyone who is joining us for our live stream. Again, we are streaming simultaneously on Clubhouse, Facebook, and LinkedIn. Actually, YouTube, I believe, as well. And so you can join us on any of those channels. And also welcome to the Solopreneurs House. I think we've got about 75 members now. I think really the reasoning behind it is that solopreneurs is a growing audience, and I think sometimes we can feel solopreneurs that we are alone. And part of the mission of creating this house was to kind of create a community where you're not alone and provide educational content like we're getting today on ways that we can kind of improve our performance. And so with that, Nalini has been someone who has been with me since we started this house. Nalini is an executive coach and a consultant and an advisor. A lot of expertise in the hospitality industry, as well as many other industries. You work with a lot of tech startups as well. And so today's topic is bracing for the entrepreneurial roller coaster ride, which I think we can all kind of identify with. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to you, Nelly. And so just make sure you unmute yourself on Clubhouse, and I'm going to mute myself, and I'm going to get off camera.
Unmuted on Clubhouse, step one. And I will share my slide. Oh, can you give me screen sharing permission? Great, thank you. Screen share begins right now. Okay, thumbs up. I think we're good. Okay, great. Hi, everyone. As San said, my name is Nalini Saxena. I'm really happy to be here with all of you today. Let me just start by setting the stage, and I'll take an extension of what San just offered you. I'm joining you from New York. I like to think about complex problem solving all over the world, wherever it might appear. And I think about it from perspectives that are business and business strategy, finance strategy, human capital and human capital strategy. But so much of it comes down to leadership and the individual at the helm, or the individuals at the helm, and how well they're working together if it is a team. I understand that many of you are solopreneurs, some of you might be entrepreneurs here today. So what I want to do is to have a chat with you about bracing for the entrepreneurial roller coaster ride. It might seem from the title that we're talking about people that are just starting out. We certainly are speaking to those who are just starting out. But we're also speaking to those entrepreneurs that have been around for a while and that are perhaps looking at the tea leaves and watching the news and having some concerns about what may be to come in their own industry, in their own space, in their geography, in their own business as well. So we're calling this an introduction to resilience, because it's really just a beginning of a conversation. And intend this to feel conversational. I invite your questions and participation if you wish to do that. And I understand if some of you want to hold your questions and comments until later. So you don't need to know too much about me, but what I will say is that the angle that I'm coming at everything from comes from a strong love for behavioral neuroscience, for management science, for empirical illustrations, and putting all of that together in a way that you can actually draw out from within yourself what your special skills are, what your special talents are, and overcome whatever challenges you're facing. So what I intend to do is to give you some ways of thinking, offer you some questions, some food for thought for you to start thinking about how you're going to approach resilience and why. So if we look at the headlines, we see everywhere that, yes, there is a psychological price to entrepreneurship. I'm sure all of you are quite familiar with that yourselves. We know also that right now there are some economic concerns, more so in some industries than others. There are questions around regulations for some entrepreneurs. Pretty much everyone is wondering, how do I keep up with tech? How do I keep up with innovation and AI? And then finally, we see this, that challenging times require business leaders to focus on resilience. Hence our topic today, an introduction to resilience. So we need to start brass tacks from the very, very beginning. How is it that we're going to define resilience? How is it that you, in your space, at your stage in the life cycle, based on whatever you are contending with, how are you going to define resilience? So for some people, they may think of resilience as a means, meaning this is the process, this is the journey, this is the pathway. For some others, they may think of it as the end. This is what I became as a result of getting scuffed up, bumping my knee a few times, taking a few shots. This is where I've ended up with. And so what I'm going to encourage you to do over the next few slides in this section of our time together is to consider, what does resilience mean to you where you are, and see if you can stretch how you think about it, and ask yourself, what is it that I came to this thinking of resilience to be, and how might you possibly stretch it? So first framework, is it a means or an end? Another way of thinking about it, is resilience a trait, like a characteristic about a person? Is resilience a process or a methodology, kind of like the means we just mentioned? Or is it what happens on the other side of it? Is this what happens as a result of having gone through stuff? And in what way having gone through stuff? Is it just a matter of having endured and allowed time to elapse? Or is it having done something actually? So here on this side, I encourage you to think about endurance versus resilience and to consider what the difference is between the two. I included these images here just to show you that when we think of endurance, we think about just being able to withstand what happens over a period of time. And we think of resilience, this is a pinprick on a hot air balloon or a balloon that is withstanding the pinprick, that is not going to get burst. And that's what we think of as resilience. If your mind happens to be going to persistence, think of persistence as endurance with intentionality, the intention to be able to withstand hardship or adversity over time. So resilience is actually quite different. It's that ability to have agility, to adjust, to adapt, to recover, and then reform, and perhaps even grow beyond. So they're actually quite different things. I have a personal interest in linguistics. I have a personal interest in being very exact and precise in choosing language. I understand that we live in a very fast-paced world, and we often swap one term for another, and I might even misuse one term for another myself. But if I can exercise trying to be really exact when I'm studying something and trying to enter into deep thought, I like to do that. And that's why I'm trying to help you see the distinction between endurance and resilience and think about how you might possibly consider what's going on in your life, in your business, and where are you exercising endurance? What are you just suffering through? And where are you seeing opportunities for you to exercise resilience? This is just some food for thought for now. We also think about resilience often as, is it absent or is it present? If it's present, check mark. But resilience is not just a matter of yes or no. Is it there or is it not? What I'm trying to show you here in this graph on the right side, I just doodled this yesterday. And as I was preparing to speak with all of you, and I was thinking, really, it's a matter of context. And in different contexts, our resilience may show up as high or higher or medium or low or really concerningly low. It really depends on the context. Another thing to think about is that our resilience might change over time. So there's a contextual element, there's a chronological and development element to it as well. It's not just a matter of yes or no, absent or present. So I encourage you to think about that also when you think about yourselves, when you think about the relationships that you may have with colleagues or associates, perhaps with vendors or other people with whom you work. And I encourage you to think about, it more on a scale and also more in terms of context and time. So if we ask the experts, not me, but the experts, psychologists, to define resilience, they'll tell you things that like this, that it's a stable trajectory of healthy functioning, or it's a process to harness resources to sustain well-being, or it's a capacity to adapt, or it is adapting well, even in the face of challenges. So that's what the experts are saying. So there we go. We conclude that piece of understanding and starting to ask ourselves some questions about what is resilience to me? Where is it that I see opportunities to grow in it? And where might I be thinking about things and refining them to actually think about resilience as opposed to just endurance? Okay, so now let's talk about adversity. So there is adversity all along the entrepreneurial roller coaster ride, and I'm sure many of you have vivid stories to describe both the peaks and the troughs all the way around. When we're wrestling with our days, entrepreneurs are wrestling with pretty much everything, and solopreneurs especially, pretty much everything that's coming at them, hitting them all at once. I've highlighted just a few things that happened in my world just yesterday. Some of these were client challenges. Some of these were challenges that I was having discussions with people about. Some were my own. So all in a day's work, there's these ups and downs and concerns and challenges to address. Well, what happens as a result? I'm sure some of these challenges that you see here on your screen actually resonate with you. Well, I'm a child of the 80s, so I remember the TV commercial, "This is your brain on drugs," and that's the image that comes to my mind, that we're really frying our brains. There's just so much coming at us, and there is an actual biochemical cost to having so much coming at us all at once. There's also an actual cost, which we'll get to, I'll touch upon a little bit. But when entrepreneurs report and solopreneurs report, well, what is the deeper impact of this? One of our Solopreneur House members and featured guests, Joe Rando, had shared a few of these in our last session that we had with you. And it's his Lifestar company that has presented these, that there's an isolation, there's a challenge of being able to fit all that you want to fit in your life, not taking care of yourself, living in this constant state of uncertainty. So there's this deeper impact. And what happens when we're in that state? Well, it sort of cascades into poor decision-making, or decision-making that we don't even realize is poor in the moment. We think that it's a stopgap. We think that it's a Band-Aid. And actually, it's leading up to creating a greater vulnerability to triggers that is so costly. This vulnerability is so costly to us that we may not even appreciate how costly it is, or where the cascade may lead, where the domino effect may lead. And so I share this with you, and you can see here that it's from not having paused all day. How many of us have those kinds of days? Or that we have a super stressful lifestyle, or we haven't taken the time and care to ground ourselves in the morning to do that morning routine, or whatever it is that you do to make sure that you are regulating your nervous system. How many of you have skipped meals or worked through dehydration? All of these are things that happen, but our heightened level of vulnerability to these kinds of triggers results in even poorer decision making. I happen to teach executive decision analysis on the MBA level, and we talk in great depth about how to fine tune executive decision making, but also how to create the conditions for optimal decision making, how to really make sure that we're not feeling overwhelmed by these kinds of things, or if these kinds of things do affect us because we have a day that's just like that, how can we actually shore ourselves up? So if we are to cultivate resilience, it affords us something. It affords us the ability to stay calm in the face of those unexpected challenges, in the face of those days that just are those days. And it allows us to stay steady and stick to our goals, even when things don't go quite according to plan. A visual here just to help you picture that. Okay, so when we're speaking about what the building blocks are, what actually are the determinants or the components of resilience, you'll find that there's many. There's a lot of research out there. I found an article here that's cited on your screen below as being perhaps the most robust that I could find, that has really fantastic definitions and theory and challenges all in one. And so a lot of what we'll cover in this next section is drawn from that. So what the research shows consistently is that there's a lot of different factors that go into resilience. It's not one formula that applies to all people in all contexts, in all situations and life cycle stages of their business, life cycle stages of their personal lives. It's not a one size fits all. That's what we have found. There are some things that do pop up more often than others. The first has to do with our relationship to self and our management of self. So self-regulation skills are vitally important. Think of self-regulation as what I just mentioned previously by way of a routine or a checklist that you perform. The things that you do that give you a sense of calm, that create a buffer between yourself and some stress. Maybe for some of you, it's that morning cup of coffee. Maybe for some of you, it's running a couple of miles in the morning, or perhaps it's putting on an outfit that you took out the day before, or that's your routine uniform for work. But something that you do that creates that buffer that allows you to lean into what challenges might come your way. That's one type of self-regulation. There are many more advanced self-regulation skills, and I'm happy to discuss those if anyone has questions or wants to talk afterwards. There's another piece to the importance of self, and this has a lot to do with the sense of agency. So entrepreneurs have this awesome sense of agency, this idea that I think I can, and I will. And there is something that is refueling about this mastery motivation system. And it opens us up, allows us to engage in a fantastic type of learning while also building whatever it is that we're building and suffering a lot of bruises along the way. So here's one piece, thinking about your self. Of course, we don't operate in a bubble and no man is an island. So the value of relationships, both close to us and also on an esoteric level, should be considered. So think of the close relationships of the people that have your back. I went to a great workshop panel several years ago of entrepreneurs in tech. And one of the panelists, and I wish I could remember her name or place her for you to give her credit for this, but one of the panelists had shared that one of the things that she discovered as a serial entrepreneur was that she had to create a text group chat with her friends and family, and she had to provide a code. And that code, whenever she texted it out in this group chat, meant that she needed encouragement, that was encouragement. And it was something really silly and innocuous, whatever was in the code, that she didn't have to go through the effort of saying the words, I'm having a really tough day, I lost a really major client, or I'm suffering from an inordinate amount of imposter syndrome right now. She didn't have to actually go through those words. She could just say code word. And these people that were her forceful congratulators, as she called them, knew immediately what their responsibility was because she had made that agreement with them explicitly. So I encourage you to think about who are those people who have my back and how can I access that in the smoothest way possible? How can I do that? She created a smooth way possible by creating a code word and building a pact. There's also another level of relationships. And, for me, I will say, confess this to you, that spiritual relationships are a great source of strength for me, enlightenment and insight for me. And often for me, this comes from my journaling exercise or a meditative exercise. And so whatever it is for you that might also allow you to self-reflect, pause, self-reflect, and reconsider how you're approaching a problem, or reflect upon and give yourself a pat on the back and credit for the progress that you have actually made. All of that factors into another version of a relationship that gives you the kind of support that you need. Hope is a fantastic thing for entrepreneurs, and I'm sure many of you as well. There's this brilliant type of hope. I think of it as the birthday candles that don't blow out when you're blowing them, the inextinguishable birthday candles. So hope is not only the conviction that something is going to turn out a certain way, but it's also the certainty that however things are going to work out, they're going to turn out in some way well, and that's going to somehow be helpful. And there's a meaning making that, I'm going to give this a shot. Even if I fail, I will have learned something. I will have tested something. It could be as simple as taking on A/B testing. Some of you may be doing that. I know San is quite the expert on that. So whatever it is that you're doing, ascribing it with some kind of meaning that this is going to help me learn something, even if it's learning through failure. It's going to help me connect to something or gain access to something, even if I have a few doors slammed in my face first. And it's this wonderful, indefatigable type of hope. And that's also a consistent building block to resilience. And so here, I just want to encourage you to think about, when are those times that you have been able to hold on to hope? When are those times when you have been able to recraft the messaging to yourself in your own self-talk and get away from the negative self-talk and make sure that you are holding on to making something mean something that's positive or constructive for yourself, not lying to yourself about it, but actually looking at it from a lens of being constructive and creative and in the spirit of forward movement. There's also some systemic and structural stuff to think about here. Yes, there is a matter of privilege. And I understand that many people say, well, I don't really have the privilege to be hopeful. I am desperate to be successful. I don't really have the privilege to think about this. And yes, I do understand that there is some element of that that may be on your minds. But I do want to encourage you with some information that 1 in 4 entrepreneurs fail at least once before they succeed. Some of you may have experienced that. I know that I experience that in my roller coaster constantly. And that even when there have been odds that have been stacked up against us systemically, things are still changing. There is still opportunity and hope for change. We see that Black women, against whom many odds have been stacked, that this is actually the fastest growing group of entrepreneurs in the United States, as reported by JP Morgan Wealth Management, which is really impressive. We think of immigrants, and I remember a pizza box that came in the early days of COVID that said, immigrants get the job done. And I wish I could have saved that a pizza box, but immigrants in the US are 80% more likely to start firms and create jobs. So I share this with you as hope as a generative fuel, that even when things may be tough, even when it may seem that you don't have a luxury of a financial cushion, or you don't have the luxury of having a network or connections or access to certain things, or you don't have the luxury of the know-how or a larger community to support you, you've come this far. You are qualifying yourself, classifying yourself as an entrepreneur. So inside of you is that brave defiance already, and that can serve as your generative fuel. I tend to wax a bit philosophical, so I will share with you the quotation at the bottom of this screen from that's supposedly attributed to a 17th century Japanese poet and samurai, Mizuta Masahide, and it says, "My barn having burned down, I can now see the moon." Just a brilliant way of looking at a challenge, looking at a suffering and seeing something beautiful out of it and seeing an opportunity. So where does all of this shake out? All of these building blocks? It's really all about you. It's all about your personalized version of resilience. It's all about your context. So why have I presented this in this kind of way? I'm speaking to you as if I would be speaking to my MBA students. I'm sort of laying out a few different ways of thinking so that you can have the opportunity to have some ahas for yourself, as in, this resonates with me or this doesn't, or this could be a way of thinking that I could take on that might be helpful to me, or this is something that I want to table or pin and come back to, or it reminds me of a podcast or a book or some really famous person who said something or did something, and I want to go into that some more. I'm going to conclude this section with 2 points. One is the power of attitude. If you were with San and me at our last LinkedIn Live at the Solopreneurs House, you will remember this slide. I really like including it because I don't think that we underscore this point sufficiently, that even when you have amazing talent, amazing abilities, and for entrepreneurs, also feeling like our idea, our vision is just so unique and so special and so fabulous, even when we start from that place, it's our attitude that has such a significant influence on what results we end up with. So if our attitude is not good or great, it's just not really possible for us to get to a place of great results. And so this is the first point I want to underscore. And second, I have to give a shout out to one of my alma maters, Fuqua. I happened to be at my reunion from the business school last weekend, and Coach K was in conversation with our dean, and Coach K was speaking about how he crafts resilience and team and leaders. And he gave us these 4 A's and shared a little beautiful vignette with each of them, and a few vignettes from each of them. It was really compelling talk. So he said, think about agility, having that experience, having that mindset of being on your toes and being willing to be on your toes, being ready, and not only being ready, but being ready to actually move, change, morph, and adapt. Second point, adaptability, actually leaning in to the change, not just being able and being ready to change and being alert to the change, which is agility, but actually leaning into it by adapting, by engaging in some kind of change. And we all know that change is not always comfortable. So actually stepping into that kind of change, and entrepreneurs are fantastic at stepping into change. So leaning into that change and asking yourself the right questions and revisiting the same things that you've been looking at with a new lens or a new perspective. There's accountability. So we spoke about agency earlier. You can think of accountability as something similar, sort of a sister concept to the agency we discussed earlier. And here's where you're taking responsibility, you're holding yourself accountable to, this is what it is that I'm trying to set out to do for these people in the service of this concept or this end. And asking ourselves, are we really aligned? Are we really living and acting and speaking and thinking in alignment with all of that? And how do we do that best? With attitude. And so something else I leave you with as we conclude our section on the building blocks of resilience. So now for a little bit of fun, which is the stories of resilience in entrepreneurship. So we'll start with the story of Whitney Wolfe Herd. You may recognize her name. Certainly you'll recognize her picture, at least her logo here, founder of Bumble and CEO of Bumble. So she originally was a co-founder of Tinder, and it's widely been reported that she sued her employer, and she experienced sexual harassment, cyberbullying, and depression, as a result of which she envisioned creating a safer space. And so it came from a place of having experienced some sort of pain. And she took that into trying to envision a world in which that kind of stuff didn't happen. And with that, she created a female-focused, a female-empowered online dating platform, Bumble, in 2014. At that time, she was listed as Forbes 30 under 30, put on the Time 100 list, became the world's youngest self-made billionaire, and all these great things. But it came from an idea generation, this spark of experiencing something that she never wanted anyone to experience again, anyone like her to experience again. So here's one story of how she took how an entrepreneur took a tough situation or a tough experience and turned it into something that has been really successful and done a lot of good. Another story, one of my favorite CEOs and entrepreneurs to watch is Sarah Blakely, former CEO of Spanx, founder of Spanx. Sarah Blakely has a beautiful story, which she has shared over and over on podcasts and interviews and articles. She has a fabulous LinkedIn page. If you don't follow her already, I encourage you to do so. She thought she was going to be a lawyer, and unfortunately, the LSAT didn't go the way that she wanted it to go. And she turned into a door-to-door saleswoman selling fax machines, of all things, after trying a little stint in stand-up comedy, after working for Disney for a short time. But she found herself to be so effective as a sales person for fax machines that she became a national sales trainer by age 25. She put the money that she had, $5,000 of her savings, and spent 2 whole years persevering on pursuing an idea that nobody had ever imagined pursuing before or taken far enough. And she pushed it to take it so far. And she was lucky and also really, really an agent in creating that luck for herself because she was so persevering. And she found a hosiery mill operator who happened to be a girl dad who was sympathetic to her and appreciative of the problem that she was solving for women, and accepted doing a trial run to allow her to make her prototype. Well, we all know what happened after that. She ran her company almost entirely, pretty much every division, every department, every function by herself, and became a self-made billionaire and sold her company to Blackstone. So again, a story of somebody who has taken challenges, many no's, many doors being slammed in her face, and turning an idea into something that she was willing to invest 2 years of her life and all of her savings and really push forward. And also, interestingly, taking on all the responsibilities herself. This is really owning the entire business, and a really impressive story. Again, I encourage you to follow Sarah Blakely. Another story of resilient entrepreneurship is the story of Vera Wang, who was born in New York City to wealthy Chinese immigrants. she initially wanted to be a figure skater and really thought that that was going to be her path, but that didn't work out. She ended up becoming an editor, the youngest editor at Vogue. But that still wasn't quite for her. She switched to work for Ralph Lauren. And at age 40, she thought perhaps it's too late for her. I don't know how old all of you are, but you may be wondering, how does age factor into resilience? So she thought, maybe it's just too late for me at age 40, but still she persevered, still she pushed through on her idea. And she became an independent bridal wear designer, winning a series of awards and building quite a fashion empire, respectable fashion empire, and being featured all across awards shows and TV and movies and functions the world over. So another story of someone who's started down a particular path, really thought that was the path for them, and then ended up pivoting. Here's a story of a Greek immigrant who is the co-founder of the Huffington Post, Ariana Huffington here. So I don't know how many of you read the Huffington Post today. You certainly must be familiar with it, but you may be more familiar with her new startup that she's running called Thrive Global. Ariana Huffington has been committed to connecting with people, first through the news, and then now through a health and wellness information app and startup company, which has been named one of Fast Company's brands that matter. She went through a lot of challenges, which she has spoken about. And one of my favorites is always feeling like she wasn't quite enough, that she hadn't fully succeeded. And she had this bucket list of all the things she felt she needed to do in order to be officially successful. One of them happened to be learning to ski. And it was only when she looked at that bucket list with fresh eyes and said, you know what, I'm no longer going to define my success as having achieved X, Y, and Z on this bucket list. I'm just going to let go of those points, X, Y, and Z, and I'm going to look at the facts. The facts are, I have built this amazing empire, this media empire. I've built this amazing network of people. I am contributing to so many causes that I believe in. So I'm going to let go and shed some of these rules that I'd previously decided that were actually constraining me like a straitjacket and inhibiting me from being able to actually enjoy my success and continue to put all my best energy towards it. Really nice story. Some of you may be in the home improvement space, particularly because of COVID, but even otherwise, you must recognize Home Depot. Bernard Marcus was born to Russian Jewish immigrant parents in Newark, New Jersey, not too far from where I am. He thought he was going to study medicine and go down that route, but it was money that got in the way. He couldn't afford the tuition. So he decided to work as a pharmacist at a drugstore. In doing that, he actually became a little bit more interested in the business side of things. And later, using a lot of his learnings and experiences, observations, and opportunities that he saw in the pharmacy, he ended up co-founding and becoming the first CEO of Home Depot. Home Depot was revolutionary at the time that it was founded. He did many things that were pioneering in his space. And another story of having to pivot and taking opportunities to pivot to do something creative. A couple more stories here. Tony Hsieh, who sadly is no longer with us. He passed away a few years ago. I had the pleasure of meeting him out in Vegas, where Zappos, his company, was based. Tony Hsieh was born to immigrant parents from Taiwan in Illinois. He went to Harvard, where he graduated with a degree. I believe it was in either computer science or economics. I don't quite remember. But while he was at Harvard, he was an entrepreneur. He was selling pizza from his dorm, and his best customer was a key relationship that he held on to as he developed Zappos years later. And Zappos, which some of you might think of as a shoe company, which I hope I can change your mind to think about it differently, was really not a shoe company. It was a company that was grounded in the idea of delivering happiness. and he's written a book with that title. I encourage you to read that book. Great book. And so Tony Hsieh is a great example of thinking about, it's not about the product, but it's about how you make people feel. If you want to think about the Maya Angelou quote that harks back to, a similar concept, a similar feeling. And that's what helped him grow his business to over $1 billion and sell it to Amazon. Let's give you another example. Reed Hastings. I'm sure all of you have a Netflix account and have used his services. Some of you may remember Netflix from its DVD days, and you may even remember Blockbuster. Netflix has not had the smoothest ride entering into the space that once was dominated by Blockbuster. But Reed Hastings' leadership was really on point in being agile, being adaptable, and he took on personal accountability for many of the decisions that he made, especially as he was pursuing aggressive international expansion, when many people were considering that was probably an invitation for doom, but it actually ended up being quite successful. So Reed Hastings is a great example of going through those 4 A's that I had listed out for you before. Connecting the Dots is the name of a nonprofit that I have had the pleasure of founding in the early days of COVID. This is not my business. This is a nonprofit venture just to get people connected and talking about issues that matter and getting involved and being the change they wish to see in the world. And as we're talking about resilience, I couldn't help but highlight some of these amazing entrepreneurs that I've had the pleasure of connecting with on Connecting the Dots. We have Derek Falcon here, who has broken down barriers and is pursuing reverse gentrification currently in Brooklyn Heights. And he's a vegan donut shop owner, and he's going to take over the world with vegan donuts. We're big fans of him at Connecting the Dots. We have Christina Perla, who just spoke with us last week at Connecting the Dots. And she is the founder of and CEO of Make Lab. So she's an additive manufacturing queen, but she will tell you about her story of resilience and how she's had to struggle through so many challenges and take on this attitude of being agile, being adaptable, and really moving on her feet in order to be able to seize opportunity. Nicole Engels, who spoke to us a few months ago, is doing some awesome stuff using AI and forecasting climate. This is currently being used to help the insurance industry. So San, you may be interested in this. Currently forecasting for the insurance industry what home prices might be in the future. And she has many other applications for it. She is a Columbia MBA alum. Megha Desai, who is a classmate of mine from college, from Barnard. She is the founder of the Desai Foundation and Trust. She is a trailblazer in the space of empowering women and children and really driving menstrual equity. She recently won an award from the Clinton Global Foundation. So Global Initiative, excuse me. So gritty entrepreneurs, people that I just wanted to share with you, and stories that I want to share with you. If you don't already follow all of them on LinkedIn, please do. They're all accessible and all doing amazing things. So as we're wrapping things up, we're going to talk about how you may be able to develop your personal resilience. And when I say we're going to talk about this, I'm sort of putting out my wishful thinking that I'm hoping that some of you may have some questions either now, if you're comfortable sharing them live, or if you'd like to talk to me outside of this live streaming interface, you're more than welcome to reach out. Something I'll put out there, because this is calmer.com, put this out there, that these are some concepts. Treat challenges as learning opportunities. Take a note of how you feel, meaning be aware and conscious of how you feel. Make connections. Build those relationships we talked about earlier. Learn to nurture acceptance. That both means a bit of forgiveness, a bit of compassion, as well as seeing things as they are. And then finally, knowing that this is about a practice, an ongoing practice. my angle, my approach to helping people develop resilience, or whatever skills they may need, the hard skills or the soft skills, is to think about what's going on for them personally. So I first like to start with beginning with the end in mind and laying out some inspiration. So this is a quotation that I had handwritten on a huge, huge Post-it and stuck on my ceiling many years ago when I was living down south and in graduate school. I'll read it to you. It's from Earl Nightingale. Successful people are dreamers who have found a dream too exciting, too important to remain in the realm of fantasy. Day by day, hour by hour, they toil in the service of their dream until they see it with their eyes and touch it with their hands. I find this to be inspiring and beautiful. I hope you see and feel some kind of resonance with yourself there. But where does this take us? What do you need to cultivate? So if we start with you, what do you need to cultivate? Rather than being prescriptive, which is against our credo at Elicit Consulting, I would like to invite you to listen to yourself, to ask some questions over here if you'd like, but engage in the process of figuring out what is it that you might need to cultivate. Cultivate also means some things that you may need to let go of in order to allow something to sprout. So this is where I will pause. I will invite San back in to perhaps share some thoughts or some questions, and I'll leave my contact info here for just a moment.
Thank you, Melanie. Oh gosh. Hold on.
Here.
Yeah.
Yep.
Second. Can you mute while I'm talking? Sorry, I'm getting the feedback. Yeah, there we go. Cool. A lot of thoughts, right? So just let me try and limit it to one thought at a time and one question at a time. But so real quickly, for those that you don't know, it's an article on Thrive Global that I wrote about kind of my own story of resilience as an entrepreneur, where I had raised money, business failed, really hit rock bottom, experienced depression. And candidly, in a lot of ways, that experience made me a better entrepreneur. So I'm trying frame this. So let me connect a sports into this question, because I'm watching the NBA championship right now. Unfortunately, my Sixers exited early and to the Celtics. And it's interesting because I watched the Sixers in Game 7 crumble. And then I see other teams, like in pressure situations, really step up, right? And so my question to you is this nature versus nurture. Like, how much, I think there's certain players that I see that are just built differently than other players, and that just thrive in those situations. And then just other players that are great players, just, in the wrong situations, just don't perform. So, I definitely see that there's ways to kind of improve your resilience, but how much of it do you believe is, nature versus nurture? Does that question make sense? Sorry, it's a little bit rambling.
No, I think I get your question. So what I was trying to lay out, and I think maybe I want to say it a little bit differently this time, but what I was trying to lay out is that there are some components of resilience that are indisputable across the board. Yet there are there's like each example of resilience, whether you look at an individual or a team, you're speaking of a team right now, has its own unique makeup with different features and different factors that they've found a way to really congeal and polish in such a way that they can thrive, right? So are there certain things that are biologically conducive to resilience? Yes. Are there certain things in early childhood development that can tee people up to having a stronger or healthier sense of attachment or a healthier sense of protection? Absolutely. So there certainly are those things. I very quickly went over a slide that spoke about such privileges. And so such privileges do exist, starting with DNA, going on to the early childhood experiences and how we're originally like set up. There are other things that there is a certain learned optimism, if you're open to it, that you can adapt and teach yourself to take on a healthy approach to failure. It's really about how you choose to craft it, how you choose to message it to back to yourself, what sort of self-talk you choose to engage in, right? We're not always all ready to take healthy self-talk, right? To take a healthy self-talk when we're experiencing negative feelings. When we're experiencing a healthy sense of self, we're not really willing or necessarily open to feedback, right? So there's another whole conversation that we can have, maybe we'll have it next time, about navigating our pores and like opening them and closing them as we need to in order to be able to stay in a space of learning. Learning itself is an act of resilience. It's an experience, part of the process of resilience. And so do I want to see myself as the winner and the champion from some time in the past, or am I willing to put myself back in the arena, be that man in the arena and actually experience the failure? So I'm speaking about, I'm sorry, sort of sprinkling in a bunch of different ideas here. My short answer to you, if I need to compel myself to come back, because I see the time alert here, there's a nature component, and there's a nurture component. The nature component should not be overplayed because there's so much opportunity in the nurture component. There's so much opportunity. And I think everyone can use a coach, a personal board of directors, advisors, sounding boards, thought partners. We need the entire village. And there's so much opportunity there. So I would not overplay the nature. I think it's fantastic when it's there, but it's neither, if it's absent, it neither precludes being able to be resilient later, nor does it mean that only those people with a certain natural DNA or early childhood setup are actually able to be resilient. That's not true either. So nurture is where there's a lot of opportunity.
Oh, awesome. No, I agree with you. And I think that's, I kind of thought that's where your head was at. So we got 5 more minutes. I actually have one more question. Let me just double check that.
Sure.
I'm not missing any chats here. So I'm going to bring another sports component in, but tie it back to the entrepreneurial piece. The PGA. So I've gotten into golf because it's the one sport as a 47-year-old I can actually get better at my age. Everything else I'm declining very rapidly. And so one of the things that I hear, they interview people about winning golf tournaments is the more you put yourself in that position where there's pressure, you have a chance to win, and you realize how your body reacts to that pressure. The more you do that, the better they get at responding to it. And so I do wonder, and I want your thoughts on this, like, is that part of the entrepreneurial journey? I think you alluded to it at one point, about the failures that entrepreneurs have, but is that really part of the journey, is just putting yourself in a position to fail, learning how your body reacts to it, and then in some sense, and I feel like this kind of happened to me, whether it's a good thing or bad thing, it's probably a little mix of both I do look at failure differently now, right? Like I almost don't look at it as failure, right? I look at it as just kind of another step in the stage, and knowing that I can over, I just need to learn how to respond to it. So how much of it do you think, that process of encountering failure, putting yourself in an uncomfortable situation, responding to it, how important do you think that is in the process of becoming a more successful entrepreneur?
So I think it comes to concepts of like risk appetite and risk management, right? So anyone who's an entrepreneur has a certain type of risk appetite profile, right? But then within that, there's a huge range, right? And so when we're in a willingness to be the underdog, when we're in a willingness to make a mistake and learn from it, because we can see that on the other side of a mistake, the other side of an embarrassment, the other side of a loss could possibly be something better that we might be interested in actually experiencing, then that really paves the way for the risk appetite and risk management if we do it astutely, right? So we take that risk appetite and we can actually pave it into risk management effectively if we really, really want to. So that's one example to give you. And again, I have a much longer answer to you, but I'm trying to give you something short. There's a great book by Angela Duckworth called Grit, which goes into this in a lot of detail. There's components and there's characteristics of grit, and there's this capacity of bounce back, that willingness to bounce back. Then there's capacity to bounce back. There's this problem solving, constant learning, and that learned optimism that I just spoke of as well. And I just want to underscore a point, since you're mentioning sports and I didn't know what your questions would be, but I think how we craft something and how we, like, the narrative that we choose to hold on to makes all the difference. If you see from the legends, from Michael Jordan's famous quotation, which I don't want to butcher, but maybe you'll know it better than I do. Can you?
The gist of it is I've missed X amount of shots so many times. I didn't make my junior high school basketball team, and basically I forget exactly how I phrased it, but basically I keep shooting it. I failed so many times, but I'm successful because I failed so many times. Is essentially what he says, and I butchered it as well, but that's the gist of it.
That's the gist of it. Thank you for that. I appreciate it. Kobe Bryant had a famous quotation, the late Kobe Bryant, famous quotation along those lines too. And it's how, like, what sort of narrative do you want to live by? What sort of narrative actually makes you comfortable? What sort of narrative are you willing to be uncomfortable with, right? So that willingness to be a little bit dissatisfied, a little bit uncomfortable, a little bit on edge, experience some losses. And then how do you astutely manage the risk that is involved, right? So how much of a risk are you willing to take, and how can you take that risk, right? So, and I just want to say, for next year, I really hope my Knicks go a lot farther than they have.
Good luck with that one. Well, about as far as my Sixers go. So that being said, we're at our hour. I appreciate coming in. I wish we actually had more time to discuss this, because I think it really is an interesting conversation, and I think it's one we probably do need to talk about more. And I think one takeaway is a little bit where we went to, and maybe next time another day we should go deeper into it. But I do think sometimes people don't realize there are ways to, exercise, do exercises so that you can become more resilient, right? And so, more consciously, right? As opposed to just kind of hoping it happens. And I think that's something that, making yourself aware of it, I think is the first step, right? It's always the first step. So, anyways, want to thank everyone that joined us throughout the hour, and, hope people are enjoying this content, and please give us feedback and let us know how we can, provide information that's valuable. And with that, enjoy your weekend, and I'm sure we'll talk to you soon.
Great. Thank you, everyone. Feel free to connect. LinkedIn is actually the best way to connect, both with San and me. Thank you.
And hold on.
Sure. I have a couple of Clubhouse messages coming in, or that came in, I should say.
How do I? Oh, here we go.
I will respond to you. Sorry.
I'm gonna stop this. I can't remember how I yeah, if you want to, I'll actually have to hop on another call, but
Sure.
I'll talk to you.
Call me later. Okay.
All right.
Thanks. Okay, bye.